Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for coming to Chatterspot today. We have two very important women with us. We have Bobbie Keith, the Vietnam weather girl, and here she is on the book that Pia Bows wrote about her. And we also have Pia. Pia, could you please stand up? Pia Bows has authored this amazing book in honor and memory. She wrote this with her husband. But Pia, I'm going to let you tell the story, so okay, please take it away.
Okay, thank you. And first of all, I want to thank Roxy for allowing me to speak here today, and to all of you for wanting me to speak today. I'm very happy to be here and to do this for you. My name is Pia Bows, and as you can tell from my accent, I'm originally from England, from London, England. And in 1995, in my late 20s, I became very interested in the Vietnam War after I read a book, a very small book on the subject, and it left me wanting to know more. And in the back of the book, it had a list of books for recommended reading. So every time I would pass a bookstore in London, I would go in straight to the military section and find books on the Vietnam War that I could read. I visited Vietnam thinking that I would learn more about the war from the Vietnamese perspective, but when I was there, the younger generation didn't really speak about the war. They liked to speak to me to practice their English, but they didn't speak about the war. I did meet one elder gentleman in Hoi An who said he spoke French, and my French isn't very good, but we managed to converse, and he told me that he was a commandant in the South Vietnamese Navy, and after the war he was sent to the re-education camps for several years before they released him back into society, civilian life. So that's really all I learned from going to Vietnam. So I returned to London, and in 2000, one of the books I was reading mentioned the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, DC. So I thought, November is approaching, Veterans Day, I'll go over to visit the wall, to pay my respects. So I flew from London to Washington, DC, visited the wall, and on my way walking along the National Mall, I met a Vietnam veteran by the name of Ray Bows.
This is how it started.
Oh,
yes. Look at this.
When he was in Vietnam, he noticed the slot machine tokens that they used in the enlisted men's clubs or the officers' clubs on base. And on the tokens, they had names, things like Camp Frenzel Jones or Camp Holloway, and Ray wondered what these names were. Who were these people that the camp was named for? So Camp Frenzel Jones was in a location called Long Binh, and when Ray visited Long Binh, the next time he visited Long Binh, he went to Camp Frenzel Jones, and he asked, who is the camp named for? And he found out that it was named for two individuals. The first one was PFC Herb Frenzel from California, and the second one was Sergeant Billy C. Jones from Okmulgee, Oklahoma. In 1987, this book came out that Ray had written, and he listed in the back, he listed all the slot machine tokens of the Vietnam War.
Oh.
And in the front, he wrote small stories of 127 installations and facilities that were named for servicemen that died. And he continued the research, and this book came out in 1996, and this is about the early years of the war. And this lists 800 installations and facilities that were named for service members that died over there. You know, places, it could have been anything that was named for them, a bridge, the landing zone, a fire base, sometimes a day room was named, and they're all included. Colonel Peter Dewey, he was the commanding officer of Project Embankment, this gentleman here at the top here. Okay, so Colonel Peter Dewey, he was the commanding officer of Project Embankment, and the OSS had sent him to Vietnam in 1945 to release the prisoners of war that were being held in a Japanese POW camp in Saigon, in the Saigon area.
Wow.
And Colonel Dewey was driving his Jeep, and he approached, there was a roadblock ahead, and he didn't have an American flag on his Jeep. And the reason was because British General de Gracie wouldn't allow it. He would only allow general officers to have the American flag displayed on their Jeeps. So Colonel Peter Dewey didn't have a flag on the Jeep, and he was approaching the barricade, and as he approached, he noticed 3 Vietnamese in the roadside ditch, and he started shouting at them angrily in French, and the Vietnamese opened fire on him. In 1952, General Brink, which is this gentleman here, General Brink, he was commander of MAG Indochina, Military Assistance Advisory Group, Indochina, and he had returned from Vietnam to report on American equipment used by the French, and the French liaison office had him assassinated at the Pentagon. So he actually died at the Pentagon, but his name is not inscribed on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, nor is Colonel Peter Dewey's name. And then in 1954, with James V. McGovern, whose nickname was Earthquake Magoon.
Oh.
I'll just show you here. Okay. And the insert is Wallace Buford, and they were pilots with they were CAT pilots, civilian air transport, and they were flying a flying boxcar and bringing supplies to the French in 1954, and they were shot down, and the bodies were not recovered until 2005.
Wow.
In Laos, in a place called Laos, and it was because Ray had written the story in this book of James V. McGovern and Wallace Buford, and he had mentioned that their bodies, that they had crashed, the airplane had crashed near a tomb in Laos. James V. McGovern was buried at Arlington in 2005. So that was one good research from Ray's part.
Yes.
For the first 2 gentlemen that were not put on the wall,
Yes.
is it possible that they can still be added?
Well, you know, I think Ray did try, and I will mention about Richard B. Fitzgibbon, because Ray did try to get his name on the wall, and they did actually put his name on the wall. But the Army has a criteria for the names to be on the wall, and they had to have been killed in Vietnam. But I think during the specific dates, because the Vietnam Veterans Memorial starts from 1959 to 1975. In 1956, Richard B. Fitzgibbon, he was US Air Force, and he would fly from Saigon to the Philippines and back to Saigon, and whenever he was in the Philippines, he would buy candy to bring back to Vietnam to give out to the children in the streets. And so he had just come back from the Philippines, and he was giving out chewing gum to the children in the streets in Saigon, and a fellow airman they had a disagreement about something, and the fellow airman pulled out a pistol and shot Richard B. Fitzgibbon there in the street in Saigon. And Richard B. Fitzgibbon's name was not on the wall, and Ray lobbied, sent letters to, I think it was Markey, the politician, Ed Markey, and he wrote letters back and forth, and finally they did put Richard B. Fitzgibbon's name on the memorial, on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and his name is the earliest name on the wall. That was 1956. Captain Harry Kramer, he was Special Forces, and he died in a training accident. It wasn't in combat, at Nha Trang in Vietnam, and his name wasn't put on the wall either. And they lobbied, the family lobbied to have the name put on, and his name was added to the wall. Yes, after the wall was dedicated. So Harry Kramer's name is now on the wall, and that was 1957. And then we come to 1959, and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. These are the first two names on the memorial at the apex under the date 1959. And they are Major Del Weiss and Master Sergeant Chester Orvenand. One evening they were all relaxing, watching a movie called The Tattered Dress, and they were watching the movie, and the Viet Minh put the rifles through the window and started shooting, and 2 advisors died. 2 advisors that survived became friends with Ray and gave Ray some information, and Ray was able to write the story of that first attack. This here is the first helicopter crew to die in Vietnam. There's the pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Joe Goldberg. Okay, he was the pilot. Harold Guthrie, Spec 5 Harold Guthrie was the crew chief on the plane, and Spec 5 James E. Lane was the door gunner. And now the first helicopters were sent to Vietnam in 1961, and they used they were called the Flying Banana, the CH-21 Shawnee helicopters. And in 1962, July 1962, these three men were flying the airplane, the Flying Banana, on a recon mission over Dak Road, and they were shot down. And then, not to forget the women, the first 2 nurses to die in Vietnam. This was in February 1966. They were flying in an airplane, in a helicopter. The pilots were, flying high and low, trying to impress the ladies, but high and low on the treetops, and they hit a high tension wire, and the aircraft split in half. Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I want to thank you all again. Thank you so much. I've really been happy to speak here today for you very much, and I appreciate your service. I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody would like to come up and take a look at her books, she's got some marvelous books up here to share. So please take a moment before you leave to come on up.